tonight we're looking at AMEB VCE exam preparation. So before we start, I've got to have a disclaimer. Tonight I am not representing the AMEB, I am not representing VCAA, and I'm not representing the music place. What you hear is my ideas and based on many years of teaching and examining. So I hope they're useful to you, but please don't go away thinking that I'm representing any of those bodies tonight. Exams, something which most students do, but often we don't actually ask the important question, why? Why do we do exams? Now it'll be interesting to ask every person here why you've done an exam or why you're doing an exam, but I think I'll try and summarise it. Most people do exams because as a student you're told to do exams. As a teacher, you think you should do exams, but you actually haven't thought about at times where it fits in the learning. Learning a musical instrument, no matter whether it's brass or woodwind or any other instrument, there's many steps along the way. And as far as I'm concerned, doing an exam, preparing for an exam is just one of them. Exams are fantastic for many reasons, but they don't suit every single student. So the idea that every student has to do an exam is wrong, just plain wrong, for so many reasons. So why do we do exams? Often one would say it's a very structured way of learning. All the work's been done for you because the syllabuses have been done, and we look at that syllabus, we work out what we want to do, then we move on to the next syllabus after the next exam. But why? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Why? In many ways, we have to look at why a student's learning. They want to get to a certain point in their performing, in their playing. So we can use exams as a way of getting there. But when I teach, exams are very much only part of what I do. They're part of the process. We do a lot of work which is not on the exam syllabus. For instance, improvisation for those instruments which are into that, which should be almost every instrument, I might add. I've got an oboist at the moment who's improvising at a very high level. It's fantastic to hear. She'll never get to use it, most likely, but it's great for the ear training. There's always more than one reason for doing things. Exams are great. When you look at the music within the syllabuses, it covers the majority of the music you would want a student to do. So that's why, as a teacher, I would recommend exams. As somebody who's been through exams, I've been through some disastrous exams myself personally. And we'll go through the reasons why. And would you say it was a positive experience in those days? Definitely not. So I think again we've got to look at why do we do exams. I would hope you would say for the positive reasons. So the student does the exam and comes out with a positive attitude towards playing. So when I hear teachers say, oh, it doesn't good to fail, I get very uptight because I don't think that does anybody any good. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. How do we use exams? And of course I'm referring to AMEB here. It could be Trinity. It could be any of the English, British exam systems. It's a system of exams that takes you from the very beginning through. It uses technical work to assist you to get from point A to point B. And it is a structured series of exams as we've already mentioned. So therefore, one would assume progressing from one to the other is the ideal thing. In recent times though, we have found at the AMEB many students skipping exams, coming in at grade 4 as being their first exam. Why would that be? Sometimes it's a cultural thing, sometimes it's an expense that they think they don't need to do it until they get to grade 4. Whether that's a good thing or not, that's up to you to come up with the answers to that, but as far as I'm concerned, the answer is no, it's not. Because in the process, they may have missed some important parts of learning. So as you can see, I'm fairly enthusiastic about exams. I'm an examiner, so you'd expect me to be enthusiastic. And I took a look at my current students at the moment. 75% of them are doing exams this year. 25% aren't. Why aren't they? I've got some who do nothing else but really specialise in jazz, so the exam system really doesn't lend itself to them. I've got 2 or 3 students who are very nervous individuals. to put them under that sort of pressure is counterproductive. A couple of others just don't like the idea of exams. They think examiners are very nasty people, so they don't want to do it. My other students who are doing exams are doing it as part of what they do this year. It's not the pinnacle, it's not the end point, it's just a progression along the way. It's part of what they're doing. So as far as I'm concerned, most of my students are doing exams either in term 2 or term 3, but term 4 is full of new things that they're doing. So for my students, it's very much part of their learning, not the only part. What are the benefits and negatives for students in exams? If we look at the benefits, clearly everybody knows what grade 2 Clarinet means. They know what standard that is. So from a standard comparative point of view, that's good. It's a good experience, we would hope. They feel good about their playing once they get a good result. That's a positive. They learn lots of things along the way, clearly. But if you look at what the negatives are, a bad result, often students give up after a bad result in an exam, more often than not. A lot of parents get very angry because they don't understand why it's been that sort of result. It may not be the student's fault, it may not be the teacher's fault, there may be a number of issues there. So we've got to be careful when we say positive and negatives about the exam because there's so many aspects to it. How should we view and use the examination process then? We should use the process, as I said before, as part of learning. And I'll say that a few times tonight because I think that's been missed along the way. Going back about 40 years ago, before I started doing music, can I add? He got it. The idea of doing an exam was very much, this was what you did at the end of the year. You led up into the exam, and a lot of teachers actually stopped teaching then until they started the next year and started the next exam. So it was all very exam-centric. I think that's a very poor way to look at it. Most of my students do exams after they've passed that level, not at that level. So when they go in and do the exam, for instance, they feel very comfortable. They feel relaxed. They perform at their best, or as close to it as you can under exam conditions. I think it's not a great idea for students to be pushing to the very limit to get through that exam, because under exam pressures, it's likely not to work. And therefore you get a negative result from an exam. And I think that's unfortunate. So most of my students, I can honestly say, get good results, but there's a reason for that. They are very comfortable to do the exam. They feel confident, and that's the main key. If you walk out tonight with learning nothing else, is that the students have to be confident about what they do. Why do students get nervous? I've seen students collapse in an exam. Not a great experience to be on the other side of the table and see a student go clunk. It's sheer fear, nervousness. They get themselves very uptight. Usually you find that they don't know something in the exam. They're not confident about their technical work, which is the usual one. Or they're just being put under so much pressure by parents that it's all just caves in. And I think, how can the student come away positive out of that? So I think it's very important that a student is confident about doing an exam. I would pull a student out of doing an exam if I don't feel that they are confident. I have no hesitation in doing that. If I lose that student because the parents are unhappy, sorry, I can't just accept the fact that the student should go in there feeling that uptight. Having been there myself. And often you find the examiners have been through these experiences, so they actually are human, and which we'll be coming up later. Oh, actually it comes up next. Examiners are human. Yes, I have put that in. Surely the examiners are there to give marks. I don't think the students actually understand that. They're actually there positive. They're trying to be really happy people and trying to give results, a good result. If somebody does something wrong in an exam, naturally they're going to comment on it because that's what they're there for. And naturally they're going to mark according to the criteria. But that's what their job is. But if you go in there confident and if you play well, everything's fine. So what's the problem? Often I've heard the comment, oh, that examiner's a nasty person. often I actually know the examiner and do anything but a nasty person, but what that usually means is that somebody hasn't done well in the exam and they're trying to blame somebody. And the examiner's obviously the person they blame. One of the things that needs to happen with exams, and this includes VCE, Certificate of Performance, AMUS, LMUS, IB, BET, any of those exam situations, you have to know what the criteria for successfully completing that exam is. There is a book, which we most likely don't, do we have one here? It's a manual for the AMEB. There's also the VCAA website, which gives you the criteria that you are being marked on. It's not a mystery. It is there. It's in the front of this book. And it has the criteria in the front of each level, telling you these are the sorts of things the examiners are looking for. This is what you've been marked on. So one of the most important things is you don't necessarily have to own one of these books, but you need to have read it. Or you need to have been on the VCAA website and seen what that says, or the IB website, or the VET website, whatever website it is, these days more websites than anything else, you need to have read what the criteria for your exam are. In the early days of VCE, and I can talk about as being an assessor in VCE, that many mistakes were made because people just didn't read correctly the criteria for the examination. Students came in with the wrong works or the wrong movements of the work. And just because they played first movement in grade 7 AMEB, they assumed it was the same movement of that work that was being used. Unfortunately, it was actually the third movement in VCE. And so often students fell into that situation, or teachers fell into that situation. So you need to actually read the syllabus. I know it's an obvious comment, but I've spoken to so many students and said, have you ever looked at the syllabus? And this is including VCE, and they go, oh no. They leave it up to the teacher. That's pretty unfortunate, I think. I say to the students, it's your responsibility. You need to check everything that your teacher does, because there is occasions that teachers can make mistakes. If you're teaching 40-odd VCE students, it can happen. Can happen. So I think it's your responsibility. Can I just ask, how many brass teachers or players are here tonight? Okay, and the rest, everybody else woodwind. How many teachers? Can I just have hands up? Okay. So if I say something you don't like, throw something at me or ask a question, please, teachers. It doesn't matter whether you are a brass player or woodwind player. So far as the syllabus is concerned, it's in writing. So it's up to you to look at that. Each exam is different. The criteria for Certificate of Performance, AMUSA and LMUSA, is very different to grade 1 or prelim to grade 8. Very different exams. We'll talk about that later. VCE is not an AMEB exam. It is a whole different ballgame. People make that mistake all the time. Long-term preparation for exams. What do I mean by that? I tend to wonder what happens when people put an exam form in to do an exam and they start getting ready then for the exam, which is only going to be 2 months away from the time they put the form in. Concerns me. Although I've just said before, it's part of their progress, but you need to plan it.